Hi, beauties, and welcome back to Aesthetic Chat with Kiki. I am your host, Kiana Gamble, and this is another episode of Season 4. I want to welcome Linda Rank to the podcast. She has so many great little pearls to share with you all, so enjoy. I first want you to just tell everyone who you are and give us a little bit of background on your story.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm just so excited that you're doing this. So I'm Linda Rank. I'm a physician assistant. I have been a PA since 2001. And directly out of PA school, I took a part-time position for a walk-in clinic, and I needed more hours. And I heard from a drug rep that a dermatologist was looking to hire a PA. And at the time, I just needed a job. I took the job in term, and it turned out to be just pure blessing in my life. I ended up finding out that I just love dermatology, especially since I was also doing a walk-in clinic at the same time. So I was realizing, wow, my patients are not unhappy. Yes, they're itchy. They may be dealing with acne and some serious skin issues, but they weren't as miserable the other patients were. And at the very same time, Botox came out on the market. At the time was 26 years old. And I was injecting this new product that people were just curious about. And I was getting treatment, and I couldn't appreciate it because at 26, I really wasn't concerned with wrinkles. But at that time, my patients were coming back and telling me how much they loved it. So that was kind of just really luck of being at the right place at the right time. After a year of working there, I ended up getting married and moving out of state. Long story short, ended up in Las Vegas and worked for a great dermatologist for 5 years. And did a lot of medical derm, a lot of research in psoriasis, and then moved back to California and worked for another dermatologist for 5 years. And it was at that point after 5 years that I just had this crazy idea that I wanted to open up my own practice. And I say crazy because I did it because I wanted to make my life easier. That was the mindset of going into it. I'm not a natural entrepreneur by any means. I just thought, wow, my husband's an ER physician and he was missing out on holidays and weekends. And I said, wow, if we just had a family business, life would be easier. And here we are 11 years later.
That's amazing that both you and your husband are medicine focused. So is he part of the business then?
Yes. So technically, yes, my husband is my medical director. When we initially started our practice, now it's been 11 and a half years, we're going on our 12th year. We had a traditional dermatology practice. You have to understand this is the very beginning of aesthetics. So there was no focused aesthetic practices at that time that I was aware of. So I had a traditional derm practice, and he was opening up a primary care practice. And we only had a primary care practice part of our practice. It was multi-specialty for about a year. He realized that he just didn't enjoy primary care. Reimbursements were horrible. He rather focused in the ER. Soon after that, he realized that he's very passionate about functional medicine and regenerative medicine. So we're at about 2016 now, and he started getting certification in functional medicine and regenerative medicine. So he started learning to harvest bone marrow in our office from patients. He was injecting PRP. And I started learning how to do O-shot and also PRP injections. The interesting thing is that this is now 2000, maybe 17 that we're offering it. No one knew what regenerative medicine was. And no one knew what PRP was. And I'm not a good marketing person. So that was a little bit of a challenge for us to change the mindset of patients. And then the story continues. 2020 happens, COVID happens, and my husband got really busy taking care of COVID patients in the hospital. Things shifted for him professionally in the hospital that made him want to put his regenerative practice on hold. I looked at my medical practice and looked at all the resources that were required to run a derm practice. And my aesthetic practice at that point had been growing so greatly that I decided to close my derm practice. And we have been full aesthetics ever since 2020.
Nice. Was it COVID that really had you really digress and go from offering a little bit of derm to just saying, no, I'm just going to go completely aesthetics?
It was COVID that gave me the opportunity to stop, exhale, think, and take a look at my numbers, and allowed me the opportunity to think about, what do I really want to do? What do I love? And I did love my derm practice, but as a solo PA provider at that point, and through the years, I had a couple dermatologists come and work for me, just never really worked out long term. It didn't make sense. And my aesthetic practice had naturally grown. And like many of us in the industry, the aesthetics industry grew during COVID and post COVID. So it was all just a perfect timing.
I'm excited for people to hear your story. You were doing a medical aesthetic practice before it was the norm. You were even in the regenerative functional med space before it was the norm. Walk us through some of those hurdles that you experienced.
I feel like my entire journey, at least the first 8 years, were all about hurdles and challenges, to be honest with you. I did not know any mid-level providers opening up their own practices. I had no one to turn to. So it was unlike maybe a physician who opens up a practice, you can go to another specialist and cross promote and cross refer patients. It's really untraditional for a physician to want to refer to a PA for dermatology. So that was hard. It was a time where social media was really just in the early stages. I really wasn't embracing it because I don't think I recognized the role it was going to play in our future. Plus, I had little kids and I was struggling. I was really struggling trying to grow a business. When my husband decided to, dive into functional medicine, I was totally on board because I appreciated and completely aligned with the idea of finding and preventing disease, finding better ways of living and biohacking. It was very challenging though, because nobody was really talking about it. There weren't, hundreds of podcasts at that point talking about functional medicine, biohacking like we have now. It was basically just word of mouth, but it was challenging to convince and open patients' eyes on investing in their own health. I think we're seeing that a little bit more now. And I think COVID kind of contributed to some of that as well. I just was ahead of the game a little bit too early.
That's amazing though. For you, you said that your practice was completely referral based. It was hard to get other physicians to back you or refer to you. So how long would it say that it took you to really build a full schedule to where you could prioritize aesthetics?
It probably took about 8 years because I really did have a pretty full derm practice at this point. We offered laser hair removal. We offered peels. We offered, I was doing full skin checks, acne, Accutane, skin cancers, biopsies, Botox and fillers. And it was really at a time where it wasn't until about 2016, 17 where like Voluma came on board, which changed the face a little bit more, where now we're starting to treat the cheek. We're starting to really address mid-face volumizing. Before, we were very limited with the access of fillers that we had. So looking back, it's almost painful, and I'm somewhat proud of myself at my resilience and grit, but also frustrated because of my resilience and grit. I didn't give up, and that did cause a lot of stress in my life. It put a lot of stress. I think I missed out on a lot of my kids' events. I had a vision and my husband was very supportive, so that was very helpful. But, at the time, I was just bootstrapping it. I was doing health fairs. I was going to OBGYN offices, primary care offices, bringing them coffee, bringing them lunch. And it really wasn't successful. It didn't match the effort that I was putting in. So word of mouth is really what it is when it comes down to it in building a service-based practice, such as an aesthetic practice. If you just give good care and great results, patients will tell their friends and so forth. When I first opened my door and had 0 patients, by the way, I was in a practice for 5 years with a very full schedule. And I just had the naive assumption that, wow, was able to be successful and have all these patients. I'll just open up doors and the same thing will happen. That wasn't true, and I was naive because patients were calling my old practice looking for me. And remember, I don't even know if Instagram was really out at this point. It was 2012, so very beginning maybe of Instagram. And my old office were telling patients that I decided to be a stay-at-home mom. I was really at ground zero with patients. So what I did is I put a Groupon. I bought a laser hair machine and I did a Groupon. And I know your audience is cringing because there's such a negative experience with Groupon, which I can totally appreciate. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody at this point, but this is early on with Groupon. And I was the only provider. And I did a Groupon and would bring patients in and do laser on them. During that time, utilize my time with that patient to develop a rapport and educate them on skincare, skin cancer, Botox fillers. And I literally grew my practice to where it is now, one by one with patients. And I think I did that for about a year by myself until I ended up hiring a registered nurse.
That's awesome. Thank you for being so transparent in, the journey of opening your practice and where you are today. I love that you're not sugarcoating it and saying it's all great and I've loved the whole journey.
I don't believe that anyone's a true entrepreneur running their business themselves and it's all like, butterflies and rainbows, because it's a lot of work. There's risk involved in entrepreneurship. There are colleagues of mine who had very solid followings on social media because they knew how to utilize it and they know how to self-promote and market themselves. And I take my hat off to them because they were able to open a practice with a full book. My situation and my timing was very different. And I can definitely speak of what it is to really blood, sweat, and tears in growing a business. I know what that means. I know the hard work that goes into it. And I did it the old fashioned way, but I'm learning. I'm still trying to get better. I have to remind myself to show up on social media. It's hard. I'm almost 49 and I just it's painful for me sometimes. And I think the pain point for me is aligning the message that I put out there in aesthetics to align with what I truly believe. And that's a fine line in aesthetics. We're suggesting and encouraging people, specifically women, to invest in themselves, which I'm a believer in. But, you need Botox, you need fillers. And that doesn't necessarily align with what I truly believe in. Beauty comes from within, and that comes from doing your own personal work.
Even looking at the people that are very successful with social media, for myself, it was like I didn't want social media to be my whole life, right? I didn't want everyone to have a very intimate experience with me just because before I was in this specialty, I posted maybe once every 6 months. I had a hard time trying to find my voice in social media because I wanted to be authentic and I didn't want it to be all consuming. I think that's the goal for everyone, is to be completely referral based. If you could speak a little bit on some of the biggest misconceptions about owning a medical practice, especially in the aesthetic space, I think that would give those people listening a good understanding of what they may be getting into.
It's not as easy as it looks. It could be very successful. It really just depends on what you're starting with. So I occasionally do bring on mentors and talk to them about building a practice, is start small. And I always suggest working for someone. Be in the industry for several years. Doing aesthetics and developing your skills is so important, because you could have all the financial resources to open up a practice and do it beautifully, but if you're not able to give good outcomes and have the confidence, then it's not really going to support that. So working for someone and developing your skills is number one. During that time, developing your brand is so important, and not just on social media, but also developing an email list, which nowadays you technically can do that if you have social media. And I would also say start small, which means I know that now, these solo suites are really popular. I think that's genius. I wish that was an option for me when I first started. My first practice was in a medical building. It was 2,800 square feet, and I did a complete build out.
Wow. That's a big space for a brand new startup.
It's very Linda. Part of entrepreneurship is you learn a lot about yourself. You learn your strengths and you learn your weaknesses. And I've learned that I dream big, I go big. I'm an all or nothing type of girl, but I've worked on that. Now I really take my time. I'm a little bit more smarter. Now I bring on people to help me with my business. So things have changed a lot and I've learned the hard way. So starting small is really important. I say, don't buy any devices for at least a year and develop demand in your practice. Know that you're going to have the patients who want those treatments that you're offering. And I would also say to really focus on marketing. Get good at marketing before you start investing a lot more in your practice. And the most important thing I recommend people who I talk to about starting their own business is personal development. I went to Tony Robbins in 2017, maybe 18. Entrepreneurship will test you. It will make you question yourself. Imposter syndrome was a thing before it became a word for me. I would constantly question myself. And I think in this landscape of social media, imposter syndrome is a thing for a lot of us. We're looking at other colleagues, other businesses in our industry, comparing ourselves. We don't know the story. You don't know the story. And there was a quote that I read years ago that I have to remind myself probably several times a week is, don't compare someone's chapter 7 to your chapter 1, because you have no idea what guidance, what assistance they have, what their life, are they happy? To me, that's the most important. Are you just happy and you have peace? Because we're all on our own journey in this lifetime. What's valuable to you is what's very different, what's valuable to me.
You said that going into building your own business, you were not entrepreneur-like mindset. If you could go back and do it again, would there be anything that you would do specifically to prepare you for what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to be a business owner? And then to tack onto that question would be, what do you specifically do to combat the imposter syndrome, or how do you make sure to keep your self-esteem and your confidence up?
What would I do differently? Everything, to be honest with you. For one, I would have found a mentor. However, I did not have a mentor for what I wanted to do. At that time, I knew a dermatologist who owned all of West Dermatology. He no longer owns West Dermatology, so over 100 derm practices. He met with me for breakfast. Dr. Blanchard, wherever you are, big hugs to you. Very successful, and he straight up told me not to do it. He says, the landscape in medicine has changed. Don't do it. You're a PA. It's going to be very challenging. I didn't listen to him because I'm a very determined person. But if I were to look back now, it's hard I have grace for myself. And I think that's really important for anyone listening, is you have to have grace for yourself. You're going to make mistakes. I would have probably had rented a room out of a primary care practice, which I tried. It just didn't work out for the timing with the provider that I was talking to. I would have started really, really small, because then I would have learned some of these lessons and some of these challenges on a smaller level versus having a build out loan and all that responsibility on my shoulders. So that would have been different for me. The second thing is, I wish I had developed more myself. I didn't really have a lot of skills in place for anxiety and stress at the time. I'm grateful for having had times of a lot of anxiety, depression, and stress, because it forced me to search for those tools. That's why I ended up with Tony Robbins. That's why I ended up going to therapy, doing EMDR, ended up doing plant medicine. It really led me down a beautiful journey to where I am now. And I'm feeling like I'm very good with who I am now. But, nowadays it's not uncommon to find a mentor in our industry. It's actually really easy. But at the time, I didn't have anyone to look back at. I remember going to the SBA, Small Business Association, and having a mentor, a 70-year-old guy who owned and he couldn't really quite understand or appreciate what I was trying to develop. Anyone who says they don't experience imposter syndrome, they're not being truthful to themselves. That's what I'm going to say, because I've talked to a lot of successful people, and it's very common, and I think it's healthy for us. I think it's an opportunity for us for self-reflection and growth. When I was on my journey of personal development and just healing with my own insecurities, which everyone has, I started working with a healer and doing a lot of breath work. I started doing this 6 years ago. Now it's a trend and it's everywhere. And I love to hear that, because I think if we started developing these tools, even with children, I do breath work with my kids and meditation. That controls me. Like, the breath work is really good. I can even do it if I'm in a room with people and I'm having anxiety, or I have a patient who's very difficult. I will start to do my breath work at that moment, a very simple technique of breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, and exhaling for like 5 to 6. You can kind of control the energy a little bit that way. Very intentional about my health. I'm not perfect. I'm always trying to improve, and sometimes I fall off track, but I find that when I'm really on it, I feel proud of myself. So when I keep my promises to myself. And another trick that I do, and I'm going to share with you, I don't tell a lot of people, is I have a folder in my cell phone under my photos, and it's highlights is what I call it. And it's photos that make me feel good, whether it's my children, a photo of myself that I think I look pretty in, a screenshot of a text of a patient or a colleague or a loved one or a friend that warms my heart and reminds me of who I am. So when I'm having a moment like that, which we all do, I just pull up my highlights and I take a look at that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, like you're loved and you're seen, and that's really important, and that will help feed me a little bit.
What a powerful, positive reminder. I love that little tip. And I think I'm going to steal that from you. When you're down or you're having a really hard day, I think it's really easy to dwell on the stresses or, the bad. But if you pull out some of the good things, I think it's a quick reminder for you to say, I have all these people that love me. I'm doing the work that I say I'm going to do. I align with my values. I think that that's a great reminder. So thank you for sharing that little tip. You came into this specialty right when Botox was really kind of emerging in the cosmetic space. Here we are now in 2024, and we know that the industry is just continuing to boom, and products and devices and all of these different things are just coming to market very quickly, right? So as you've seen over time, all these different products come out. What is your advice for those people that are just entering this space and they're overwhelmed? How do you navigate that for someone who came in and there are multiple fillers to choose from versus, maybe one or two back then? How do you decipher what's legitimate? What's more of a trend?
Wow, I'm so grateful that I came at a time where things were being released slowly. It was like the wild west. We didn't really get a lot of training. It was hands-on training. And I think for new injectors coming on to the scene, it can be overwhelming. And I acknowledge that and I have a lot of empathy for them. I think that you have to dive into aesthetics, not just, a full-time job working for a derm or plastics or for an aesthetic practice, but you have to invest in your own training. You can get good training through some of the large pharmaceutical companies. I'm a trainer for Allergan. I would say that you have to put aside about $10,000 a year for your own training. Just do your own research and find people in the industry that you align with. And what I mean by that is you like their vibe. I would say you want your mentor to be someone that you would love to be in their shoes, whether it's the way they practice, the way they show up professionally. Connect with them and find out what are the legitimate and the quality trainings to go to. In terms of products that you love, well, I think if you're working for a practice, you're kind of just going to have to play with what's available to you. I mean, that's just the reality. But ask your provider questions, and hopefully you're in a practice where you can have an open dialogue. And if you don't, then you need to maybe change jobs. That mentorship early in your career is really important, and putting yourself out there and getting your hands on product is really important, and following up with your patients, because it's really about patient outcome. And if you're not following up for, pictures afterwards, asking patients how they're doing, then you're not going to really know. You don't know if you like a certain product or not. Also, just have patience. I mean, you don't know how you like products for a long time. You got to have your hands on products for months to years, really. I'm still playing with products all the time. I test everything that comes out, but I tend to be pretty loyal to companies that support me as well.
Specifically speaking to, what's trending most on TikTok or Instagram, whether the procedure is nose filler or Barbie talks, or, all the different things that are coming out. Would you say be very cautious in what's trending? Or would you say, no, go with the trends, try everything, do everything? Like, what is your advice?
Personally speaking, I will say that I'm not on social media very much. And I'm not on TikTok. I don't spend hours on it looking at trends. I go to conferences. I have a handful of Instagram accounts and colleagues that I highly respect, and I have friendships with them. When I remember hearing about the trap talk, gosh, a while ago before it became really popular, now it's called the Barbie talks or something. Probably for a good year, I really wasn't a fan of it at all. Just understanding muscles and how they counteract on each other, it seemed a little dangerous. There's not enough training, and I think it's really easy for providers to see something on YouTube or TikTok and take a look at a video and go, okay, I'm going to just do 10 injections there, and not really know the right questions to ask the patient about their lifestyle, their exercise history, their injuries. I'm more of an observer at trends for a very long time.
I think it's good to be cautious. And my biggest fear is doing a bunch of procedures that we don't necessarily know the long-term outcomes of on people that are very young, who don't necessarily need anything right now. And does that impact their overall health and longevity and quality of life when they're 50, 60, and 70?
I see a lot of people jump on the bandwagon really quickly. The landscape has changed so much in the aesthetic industry. Back in the day, everyone who was in the aesthetic industry kind of was at the right place at the right time. So I feel like our intention was very genuine. I'm seeing a lot of very young people who go specifically into medicine and aesthetics to be in the aesthetic industry. And I would say many of them they have their heart in the right place and they're an amazing addition to the industry. But there's also a handful of people who are in it for the glamour of it. I think patients should be very careful. They have to research their providers. For new people coming into the industry, be super mindful and don't lose sight that you are a brand, and how you show up professionally is very important. So if you are just posting about something you just saw and you're doing it right away, you're not researching it, that may bite you in the tooth later on.
I think that's just a great little pearl. Any other advice that you would have for an injector that's been injecting, less than 5 years? They're not brand new, but they are still considered new in the space of aesthetics. Do you have any advice for them going forward to build their brand, build their skills, or just in general?
I think something that's overlooked a lot is telling people that you have to really develop who you are as a person. And I say that because the industry has invited a lot of really young providers who, as I mentioned earlier, are coming into the industry because in junior high and high school, they're on Instagram and they saw injectors. You have to know who you are when you brand yourself. And you have to know where you stand with integrity and with character. You have to know why you want to do this, because what we do is very special. There is nothing that I know that is like what we do as injectors. We're medical providers, we're therapists, we're healers, we're artists. You have to really know why you want to do this. If you're opening up your own practice and wanting to work for yourself, the number one question I ask people is why? If you think it's because it looks glamorous and you want to say you work for yourself, your own business, think about it clearly. You have to really know, is this what I want? Do I want the quality of life? Am I willing to work hard? Am I willing to take on the responsibility and the weight of having employees? Like, I feel personally responsible for my team, not just for their paychecks, but also to develop them as people too.
Thank you for just saying all of that. That's a huge component that you need to know about yourself. Lastly, I would like you to share a few of your 2024 goals.
Just wanting to be strong. That's really important to me. Also, personally, joy. I'm all about wanting to bring joy and fun into my life. I think for too many years, I put it on the back end, and I'm embracing this year, trying to do a lot of fun things with my children. My son's leaving for college this summer. Professionally, really setting up my business so that it is so clean with the systems and processes that if I wanted to sell my practice, it's ready to go. I have no intention of selling, just for the record right now.
Well, amazing. Thank you, Linda, for coming on the podcast. Tell everyone where they can find you on social media, where they can find your practice if they have questions.
Personal Instagram is Linda Rank _beauty PA, and my practice is called Soul and Beauty Med X, and we're located in Mission Viejo, California.
All right, beauties, and that was a wrap on this episode. Thank you again, Linda, for your time. I just really appreciate your honesty and really stressing personal development, because I think that that's something no other guest has really touched on thus far. You know where to find the podcast. It is at aesthetic.chatwithkiki on Instagram. My Instagram is at aestheticnurse.kiki. The website is aestheticnursekiki.com, and you can find my practice, Natural Aesthetic and Wellness, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So, until next time, beauties. Bye.